On September 10th, 2025, at around 12:23 p.m., MAGA podcaster and Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk was shot and killed with a single gunshot while speaking at Utah Valley University. The shooter has been identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. Evidence suggests that he may have been connected to the Groypers, or influenced by them, which is an alt-right white nationalist and Christian nationalist internet group led by Nick Fuentes, though it has not been confirmed by authorities as I'm recording this. Just 7 minutes after Charlie was shot at 12:23 p.m., police received reports of an active shooter at Evergreen High School in Evergreen, Colorado. The gunman was 16-year-old Desmond Hawley, who turned the gun on himself after shooting and injuring 2 other students. As I am writing and recording this, we have very little information about these 2 shooters. But I do believe that what happened to Charlie Kirk and the victims of Evergreen High School was not random, nor was it aligned with any particular or recognizable political ideology. It's likely part of a much bigger story that's unfolding online, one that's pulling kids, mostly teenage boys, from memes and gaming into extremist subcultures, and sometimes into real-world exploitation, radicalization, and violence. And I believe this because I have firsthand experience with it myself. Toward the end of last year, I was targeted by one of these internet subgroups. They brigaded my channel, tried to incite culture wars in my comments, sent me graphic and violent threats, and even uploaded a YouTube video attempting to dox me and threatening harm on me and my dog. At first, I thought these were just edgy internet trolls, but when I started obsessively tracking and tracing it, I realized it was part of something much bigger. And I want to talk about that today because I believe that it is one of the single greatest threats to our country and to our youth. And I want to state that this was kind of a difficult video for me to put together because it brought up a lot of stuff that I didn't want to think about anymore. And I fear that my brain might get a little scrambled when talking about this, so I have decided to write everything out ahead of time so that I say exactly what I want to say. This video is not about me, nor is it about Charlie Kirk. It is about the pipeline that connects these online subcultures to real-world violence. It's about how spaces that look harmless, like Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, Discord servers, TikTok feeds, are being weaponized to radicalize kids. It's about how edgy humor, irony, memes, and trolling are being used as recruitment tools, blurring the line between just joking and extremist ideology. And it's about why we as a country cannot afford to dismiss this as random or harmless. This video will contain a lot of potentially triggering language and information, and although I plan to be very careful with what I share and how I share it, I would like to advise that you watch this with caution. I learned of the shooting of Charlie Kirk as I was sitting in the grocery store parking lot. I was reading the news, feeling a sinking feeling in my stomach. Political violence, no matter which side you're on, is a devastating sting, because violence always sparks more violence, and I knew in my heart that this would be a defining moment in our country. As I walked through the store surrounded by normal people doing normal things, I felt a deep existential discomfort and panic. I was pushing the cart down the cereal aisle with one hand, my phone in the other, when I learned that he was declared deceased. That evening, we all watched in horror as the right wing lit up with violent rhetoric against the radical left, as they called it. They claimed that someone who hated Charlie, God, and conservative values must have done this. Before the shooter was known or found, supporters of Kirk and Trump spared no time playing the blame game and calling for revenge and even war against those on the left. I grew up with a right-wing conspiratorial family that believed Obama was the Antichrist and that Democrats were forming a secret world order to enslave us all and convince us to take the mark of the beast as outlined in the book of Revelation. My response to that as an adult is to avoid any and all potential conspiratorial political thought. But the right's immediate jump to political warfare against the left within hours of Charlie's death was very suspicious to me, and it still is. I'm not saying that what happened to Charlie wasn't real, but I do believe that the Trump regime knew that they were continually, intentionally fanning the flames of violence and were prepared to use the first instance of it against their own people for political gain. I knew better than to jump to any conclusions and had an inclination, like many others did, that the right wing was wrong with their pointed fingers. And just a day later, we found out a lot more about the shooter. That he was a white male who came from a gun-loving, Trump-voting, conservative Christian family. The very kind of family Republicans claim raises upstanding, moral citizens. His exact political ideologies are still not known, but some details have emerged that shed some light. According to an article in Time magazine, investigators found inscriptions engraved on the bullet casings that referenced obscure memes and language common to online gamer culture. While they have no clear indication of a political affiliation, they did reveal that Robinson was a person who spent a lot of time online. Some have attempted to draw a link between Robinson and the far-right Groyper movement. The movement had been at odds with Kirk's brand of conservatism for some time. Professor Joan Donovan, assistant professor of journalism at Boston University and an expert in extremism who has written a book about meme culture, said Robinson appeared to have relied heavily on memes to express his own identity. There is nothing expressively conclusive about his participation in specific online groups as of now. His social media and posting histories are not available. But these memes tend to be posted on more politically incorrect anonymous message boards and gamer chat apps, she told Time. The ambiguity is the point, she added. What memes say about people can be complicated, but they can illustrate what someone finds to be funny or signal their affiliation with certain online subcultures. In the set of engravings, he referenced some more ambiguous symbols and a clearly homophobic joke. The ambiguity is a crucial element of memes because not everyone is in on the reference or knows its origins, she added. I'm going to spend some time telling you my own story, how I got pulled into this dark web of edgy humor, gaming culture, child exploitation, and political radicalization. And it's kind of a wild ride, so stay tuned. But before I do, it's important to understand that what happened to me is part of a larger pattern. These aren't isolated incidents. Around the country and around the world, we've seen young men radicalized online, immersed in memes and anonymous chats, and then stepping into the real world with devastating violence. And the politics of it all aren't as black and white as the general population wants to think. In January of 2025, in Nashville, Tennessee, 17-year-old Solomon Henderson killed one classmate at Antioch High before taking his own life. In his own writings, he praised the Christchurch shooter, who was motivated by far-right ideologies and was active in online white supremacist spaces. Investigators later found that he followed Natalie Samantha Rupnow, another young extremist. Natalie Rupnow killed and injured 6 before committing suicide. On Telegram, she had been invited into chats with extremists, including the perpetrator of a mass stabbing in Turkey who praised accelerationism and white supremacist terrorists. Just last month in Minneapolis, Robin Westman, who was 23, killed 2 children and injured 21 at a Catholic school. Their now deleted YouTube videos expressed violent, anti-Semitic, racist, anti-Hispanic, and anti-Catholic beliefs. Experts say the case shows how mixed ideologies can fuse into violence. In May of 2022 in Buffalo, an 18-year-old murdered 10 black shoppers. Radicalized on 4chan and Discord, he wrote a manifesto citing the Great Replacement Conspiracy and praised Christchurch shooter. In August of 2023 in Jacksonville, Florida, 21-year-old Ryan Palmeter killed 3 at a Dollar General. Active on 4chan, 8chan, and Soyjack Party, his gun was covered in a swastika and racial slurs. He referenced far-right memes. In May of 2023 in Allen, Texas, Mauricio Garcia killed 8 people at an outlet mall. His online post showed that he self-radicalized into neo-Nazi, white supremacist, and incel ideologies. In El Paso, Texas, in August of 2019, a shooter killed 23 at a Walmart. He posted a manifesto to 8chan echoing the Great Replacement and citing Christchurch as an inspiration. At a synagogue in California in 2019, John Ernest killed 1 and injured 3. He expressed white supremacist beliefs, admired the Christchurch shooter, and promoted the white genocide myth. In June of 2015 in Charleston, Dylan Roof murdered 9 parishioners in a church. Self-radicalized online, he spent hours isolated in gaming and published a racist manifesto. Later, shooters from Buffalo to Christchurch cited him as an inspiration. In July of last year in Butler, Pennsylvania, Thomas Matthew Crooks attempted to assassinate Donald Trump, killing 1 bystander. FBI uncovered an account with hundreds of anti-Semitic, anti-immigration posts promoting political violence. And this is just to name a few. According to an analysis by the Institute for Economics and Peace, there was a 320% increase of far-right terror incidents between 2014 and 2018. Studies have also proven that radicalized alt-right male, native-born attacks outnumber attacks by both documented and undocumented immigrants combined. According to a report published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, as of 2020, right-wing terrorism accounted for the majority of terrorist attacks and plots in the United States. In October 2020, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security reported that white supremacists pose the top domestic terrorism threat, which FBI Director Christopher Wray confirmed in March 2021, noting that the Bureau had elevated the threat to the same level as the threat which was posed by ISIS. Of course, we cannot forget that on January 6, 2021, a mob of rioters supporting President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 United States presidential election stormed the U.S. Capitol during speeches made by Trump and his allies at a rally. A February 2021 poll found that 58% of Republicans believed the Capitol riot was, quote, mostly an Antifa-inspired attack that only involved a few Trump supporters. That day showed what happens when the online pipelines of conspiracy, trolling, and extremist memes spill out into the streets. It wasn't just politics, it was a culmination of years of radicalization in the very online spaces we've been talking about. If you only listen to Fox News, right-wing media, members of the GOP, and Donald Trump himself, you would likely scoff at the idea of the dangers and prevalence of right-wing and alt-right extremism and believe that what threatens Americans and their safety most is left-wing extremism. But there is overwhelming evidence and confirmation from investigative groups, both independent and within our federal government, that gives a completely different story. And I really hope that if there are any curious right-wingers watching this right now, you'll ask yourself why the current administration is ignoring facts in favor of feeding you false propaganda. I've seen firsthand how these online spaces operate and how quickly they turn from just memes into something much darker. This is where my own story connects. Quick note, I'll show screenshots, but I'm concealing names and using code names. These groups seek attention. The one that targeted me was a small splinter of a larger, more dangerous network. It now appears mostly defunct, and many involved were minors. I'll share patterns so parents know what to watch for, but I won't identify specific users. That's for safety and because ambiguity denies them the clout that they crave. On December 6th, 2024, in the car heading home from an outing with my husband, I start getting a sudden burst of comments. 3 or 4 accounts with similar cartoon avatars accusing me of being anti-Islam, demanding an apology for things that I've said. I've never covered Islam on my channel. I can't even remember ever mentioning Islam. But for those who are new here, this channel has been a space for people who are deconstructing from their Christian ideologies, specifically right-wing conservative Christian ideologies. Minutes later, more accounts flood in. I look over at my husband from the passenger seat saying, "Babe, I think something really weird is happening." I've had my fair share of experience with trolls, and I assume that's all it is, so I block the accounts and I just keep scrolling while we continue driving home. But then the anonymous emails start rolling in. In these emails are graphic threats of bodily harm, sexual assault, threats to kill my dog, and violent language about children and animals. The emails contain 2 addresses that I've been connected to in the past. One of my childhood homes, where one of my parents currently still lives. Another is an address I've never lived at, but I do have a connection to. It's clear to me in this moment that whoever is sending these emails is searching through online records to find where I currently live. As more emails roll in, I call the local police. The officer seems entirely unconcerned and tells me in a thick Tennessee accent that there's just not much he can do, which feels incredibly defeating. The next morning, we wake up and go into town to purchase some at-home self-defense, and I spend the rest of my day inside, scared to even let my dog out into the yard. The emails keep coming in for several days. One of the emails links a YouTube channel calling itself Serbian Warlord, so I check the link source to make sure it's safe, and I look at the channel. It has a Discord link in the bio and an Israel flag banner. It also includes graphic support of sexual assault in the channel name, using special characters to escape the auto moderation tools that YouTube uses. It includes content that mocks death and includes Middle East political rhetoric that stands contrary to the rhetoric I was receiving in the emails and comments. I don't know it at the time, but I come to find out later that this bizarre mix of ideology is deliberate to cause confusion and shock. When I see this video with my name and the accusation, my heart sinks into my stomach. I have a copy of the video, but I will not show it here, and I couldn't bring myself to watch it again for the purpose of this video, so I am going to do my best to describe it from memory, which should be easy because it is seared into my brain. This video shows a picture of my parents' house pulled from Google with racial slurs, a threat against my dog, paired with religious text, and an obscured animal abuse clip. I report it over and over again. Friends report it. It stays up for a few weeks, but the account has now been deleted. Then I find another video posted by a different channel, which has Islamic imagery paired with a voiceover telling me to turn from my feminist ways and revert back to Islam, even though I have never been Muslim in my life. Things get a lot weirder when a longtime supporter of mine starts posting hostile comments in the same vein as the harassment. This person was always cheery and kind and was even a paid member of my channel. But then duplicate accounts appear with variations of their name, leaving more hostile comments, and I immediately move to block them. I start thinking about how often scammers come to my channel and leave links for others to click, and I'm thinking that's likely what happened. This person clicked a link and their account was hacked and compromised. Their channel turned into a bizarre conspiracy channel with videos about Palestine. I learned that this is part of the tactic, to disorient the target and make them paranoid and suspicious of everyone. And for a little while it works. I become afraid to even read my comments, not knowing who is genuine and who is in on the harassment, not knowing if the typical mean comments I always receive are related or not. I start getting heavy-handed with the block button as my paranoia intensifies. I am advised to contact the FBI, which I do. By this time, I have already started frantically researching and taking screenshots, and I'm sure I look like a crazy person trying to explain everything to this agent. But he takes all the info, and then I never hear from him again. But I am not the kind of person that can just let things go, and I think for my own personal feeling of safety, I need to find out more about who is doing this and why. I need to get my power back. A friend of mine begins doing her own sleuthing and finds that one of the accounts that posted a comment on the threatening video upload also has a matching TikTok account with the same name and content. I'll call that person Reggie. The videos on Reggie's YouTube and TikTok includes animal harm bait and brain rot style edits. I begin the process of mapping every comment, every profile interacting with Reggie. For a day or two, this led to dead end after dead end after dead end, but I refused to give up. Eventually, I hit a lead. I find an account, which I'll call Sorry. The account has around 30,000 followers and hasn't posted for around a year. The content includes mostly Roblox trolling content, plus one post with their real face and voice. This is when I start cross-checking followers and comments, and I see repeating patterns. The emails I received actually named the group, but I didn't recognize the meaning at first. Through Reddit and TikTok and Google, I discover it's a splinter of a shock troll scene. Discord servers spammed gore, possible child sex abuse material and grooming, sextortion, doxing, exposing videos, and self-mythologizing. They create fake accounts under the guise of exposing their own group and their tactics to inflate their legend and make them seem scarier. I find TikTok videos and Reddit posts talking about the dangers of this group, only to do a little digging and find that those speaking out are actually trolls within the group. And then there are comments from others scoffing at how ridiculous they sound and claiming that it's all just made up. It's like they are cosplaying as the more violent and dangerous groups and trying to build up their own infamy. The post exposing them reminded me so much of the satanic panic, when parents were warning of all these satanic groups that were trying to harm children. And that's so disorienting because I know better than to fall for things like the satanic panic, but I can't decipher just how real or made up the claims about this group are. Because while there are posts exaggerating their tactics, I was receiving extremely violent and graphic terroristic threats from this very group. And I realize that I'm damned if I speak and I'm damned if I don't, because they spent so much time dramatizing their efforts that most people were just writing the claims off, calling it a hoax or a myth. If I don't speak out, this kind of harassment might happen to someone else or even escalate. If I do speak out, I sound like every parent in the 90s falling for the hysteria of the satanic panic. It feels like either way I lose. So I'm still digging, taking screenshot after screenshot, furiously taking notes. And eventually I learn a lot more about this group, which was mostly active in 2022, but seemed to quiet down over the last few years. That brings me to the leader of this splinter group. I'll call him Little Shit. Little Shit shows up on this iceberg meme of troll lore I found on Reddit, and he's at the very bottom of the iceberg. In 2022, he went minor viral with rage bait and content that was making fun of recently deceased YouTubers and their family members. His followers followed suit. He was only around 15, I believe, at the time. He disappeared from the internet after a year or two of little shittery, but I did find a more recent account of his under a pseudonym that he doesn't post from, but he is still lurking around. Don't ask me how I know this, I just know, and that's all I will say about that. I learned that when these groups dissolve, there are always new kids that learn about them and then pick up their tactics, reviving the same group with the same names but with all new players. This helps them stay obscure and anonymous and difficult to trace. So at this point, I'm really not sure if I'm dealing with the original players of this group, which all seem to drop off a couple years prior, or new kids that are just working under the umbrella of that group's name. It's all incredibly confusing on purpose by design. And I become obsessed. And I'm spending every waking moment gathering information, cross-checking profiles and comments and followers. I'm using reverse search tools and image recognition software. My entire life comes to a halt, and this is the only thing I can think and do. I'm sitting at my computer for 12 to 14 hours a day, staring at a screen with my husband reminding me to eat and get some sleep. And then I get a major break that confirms the identities of several key players. I land on a teen's account. I'll call him Chad. Chad is 16. His username is a play on Little Shit's name, and he has an area code in his bio. He has 4 posts dating back 2 years, one of them smoking a cigarette, one crashing a car after he stole it, another from inside a speeding vehicle that intentionally hits deer in a suburban neighborhood, and then the oldest upload, which is a screen recording inside Little Shit's Discord in the prime days of their group's activities. This video is a couple years old, but it has a recent comment from an anonymous account that reads, "Total Little Shit and Little Shit Club victory." Timestamped on the same day that my harassment started. Chad responds Sigma Ohio, which is Gen Z language, but also code that this group repeatedly uses. They are celebrating their victory in their harassment efforts against me. From there, the web widens. SoundClouds, Instagrams, Facebooks, cross-linked aesthetics, right-wing memes. I'm finding last names in high schools, parents' LinkedIn accounts. Digital footprints are real, and kids have no idea how many breadcrumbs they leave behind even when they think they are being anonymous. And how easy it is to look at grammar, spelling, language, theming, timestamps to connect alt accounts to main ones. I see juvenile custody, group homes, and years of escalating rage bait. Some of these kids are outcasts, carrying a lot of baggage and looking for an outlet. Others actually came from seemingly good homes with well-off middle-class parents, but were sucked into this world through gaming and online culture. What really strikes me was seeing these alt accounts of these kids posting cruelty and extremist memes, propping up white supremacy and violence, while their public-facing main accounts show family holidays, love for their pets, and even kindness. These are kids living 2 lives, one public, one algorithm-fed and radicalizing. By the end, I can map out key players, multiple alts, and real identities. I'm no longer afraid of the splinter because they're mostly teenagers, but that doesn't make them harmless. It makes them targets and tools for bigger predators and ideologies. Because the language, symbols, and humor in their feeds mirror the patterns we see in recent extremist violence. That's the point. What happened to me is not an isolated troll raid. It is a window into an ecosystem where shock trolling blurs into exploitation and political extremism, a pipeline designed to confuse, desensitize, and recruit. And it's growing up inside the platforms kids are using every day. There isn't just one thing happening in these spaces. There isn't one political ideology, which is why it's so important that we talk about this and bring it to light. Because even after I made a recent post warning about this, several people commented scoffing at the idea that what happened to Charlie Kirk and what is happening all over could be related to this right-wing and alt-right pipeline. Because they don't recognize the obscurity, irony, humor, and intentional confusion that is used to deflect from where all this stems from. And I want to make sure people are aware. It would be impossible to pinpoint one perpetrator of these ecosystems. This is not a single coordinated effort by one person or group. There are so many people, groups, and governments that benefit from all of this. But I do believe at the end of the day, there is one single goal that those who inflame these ecosystems work toward, and that's accelerationism. This was a word that came up a lot in these spaces that I was researching. Accelerationism is basically the belief that the way to change society isn't by fixing it, but by speeding up its collapse. The idea goes back to philosophers in the 20th century, but today it's taken on a very dark meaning, especially in online extremist spaces. There are 2 broad kinds. On the left, accelerationism is more about using technology and capitalism's own momentum to push us toward new, more equitable systems. But on the right, accelerationism is openly violent. White supremacists and other extremists believe the faster they can destabilize society through violence, chaos, or culture wars, the sooner they can rebuild it in their own image. And this is where online culture plays a role. On platforms like Discord, Telegram, and fringe boards, accelerationist ideas are hidden inside memes, ironic jokes, and edgy videos. For outsiders, it looks a lot like nonsense or brain rot. But for insiders, it's a shared language, a way to normalize racism, anti-Semitism, and violent fantasies while claiming it's all just trolling. The big goal for right-wing accelerationists is collapse. Collapse of government, collapse of democracy, collapse of the social order. And in that collapse, they believe they'll have the chance to seize power and install authoritarian, ethno-nationalist systems. But who benefits from this? Foreign governments who desire a collapse in the US system? And we already have insurmountable evidence of foreign interference in our political spaces online and in our elections. Extremist leaders who gain influence and power from chaos. Online communities who get clout and status by pushing boundaries, and sometimes even tech boosters who argue that accelerating things like AI or automation, no matter the risks, is the only way forward. What makes this so dangerous is that accelerationism strips away the usual limits. Violence isn't seen as a tragedy, but as a necessary step toward the end game. And when that mindset seeps into online ecosystems built on memes and gaming, it creates a breeding ground where kids are desensitized and real-world violence starts to feel inevitable. It requires exploiting all political ideas and opinions from both sides of the spectrum to deepen the divide between those with different opinions. They will target the left wing and the right wing with information that move both sides further from one another, creating more tension and more anger. If I had reacted quickly in my emotions and made a post or a video warning all of my followers about these extremists that were attacking me, these Islamic extremists, it would have started a frenzied comment war between people across the political spectrum, furthering the divide between the religious and the non-religious, the right wing and the left wing. The goal was to exploit our fears and political frustration so we would react and continue fighting. And perhaps the goal of those that were attacking me was just to get a good laugh, but they were being influenced by a broader system whose goal is to make us fight. The more we fight, the more divided we are, the easier we are to conquer. This is beneficial to anyone who wants to hold power, whether that be foreign governments, American political leaders, and even political influencers. But it doesn't benefit the American people whatsoever. When 23-year-old Robin Westman walked into a Catholic school, opened fire, and killed 2 children before turning the gun on herself, many people were quick to conclude that because Robin was trans, she must have been part of some radical leftist ideology that led her to this point. A local Turning Point chapter leader in my area, you know who you are, uploaded a video calling this a hate crime against Christians and suggesting policy change regarding trans people and their access to gender-affirming care, claiming that these treatments are causing violence, which, from what I've read, there is no evidence to suggest Robin had taken any kind of hormone replacement. Passages from Westman's diary appeared to show that she held racist and anti-Semitic ideology, idolized school shooters, and struggled with and shamed herself for her trans identity, which is exactly what you would expect if she was exposed to a lot of right-wing ideology that condemned such an identity. But Westman's political ideology is confusing and doesn't fall on one side or the other of the political aisle, and it reflects the broader online environment she was exposed to. Rachel Carroll Rivas, interim director of the Intelligence Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center, a nonprofit that studies hate crimes and extremism, said a motive may not fit neatly into a box. It's too early to fully assess what may have brought about this horrific violence, but early indications show a young person expressing a mix of ideologies, politics, and inspirations, she said. And when I read that, it made perfect sense, because it aligned with exactly what I saw in my research of these online groups. It's part of the pipeline, which pulls lonely kids with mental health issues from gaming and social media platforms into spaces that use irony and humor to normalize political violence, so that over time, the violence and cruelty becomes the ideology. It's no longer about left and right. It's no longer about any political ideology or values whatsoever. It's about war and anger and division and fueling those in power so that they can continue holding it. So how does this pipeline work? How do kids go from playing games or scrolling YouTube to grabbing a gun and using it in an act of terrorism? In order to connect the dots, you must first understand the alt-right and the tactics used by the right-wing extremists. which you might find eerily similar to how the current regime has run and succeeded in its campaign. The term alt-right exploded online in the early 2010s, especially on sites like 4chan and Reddit. These were once more libertarian spaces, but over time, 4chan's politics board shifted sharply right. What started as troll culture and absolute free speech evolved into something much darker. Scholars describe the alt-right as an outgrowth of online antagonistic communities, where irony, harassment, and edgy memes laid the foundation for extremist policies. One of the key turning points was Gamergate in 2014. What began as a backlash against women and feminism in video games quickly became a full-blown harassment campaign. Journalist David Newart called Gamergate the blueprint of the alt-right. Trolls, conspiracy, angry white male victimhood, and eventually open racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny. Gamergate politicized thousands of young men who saw feminism, multiculturalism, and political correctness as threats to their identity. That outrage helped build a bridge between Chan culture and the alt-right. By 2015, the movement gained serious momentum online. Donald Trump amplified it when he retweeted white nationalist hashtags like hashtag white genocide and accounts tied to the movement. Alt-right leaders saw Trump as their champion. At a notorious 2016 conference, Richard Spencer ended his speech with "Hail Trump, hail our people, hail victory," met with Nazi salutes. When asked later, he brushed it off as irony and exuberance. That phrase is important. Irony became the mask for hate and provided a path for plausible deniability of extremist rhetoric. The alt-right's real ideology rejects equality, democracy, and even the Enlightenment values America is built on. It is profoundly anti-egalitarian, hostile to liberal democracy, and often blends white nationalism with cultural Christianity. What's interesting is that many members are secular or atheist, but cling to Christianity as a symbol of Western heritage. Basically, they know that the label Christian comes with a social boost and automatic trust. One of the alt-right's biggest recruitment tools was memes. Most famously, Pepe the Frog. Originally a harmless comic character, it was hijacked by far-right trolls on 4chan and spread as a political weapon. So much so that Trump himself tweeted these memes. The meme became a Trojan horse for extremist symbols and in-jokes. After the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, the brand of the alt-right started to collapse because the general population found them to be violent. Leaders were disgraced and social media platforms cracked down on alt-right leaders and influencers. But that didn't end the danger. It just pushed the activity back underground, where it mutated into even more fragmented and violent subcultures. Researchers warned that as the movement lost political power, lone wolf terrorist attacks would rise. And they did. This process is often what's called the alt-right pipeline. It starts with relatively mild anti-social justice or anti-LGBTQ or anti-feminist content. YouTube's algorithm and other social media systems recommend related videos, slowly escalating from mainstream culture war pundits to more extreme ideologies. Islamophobia, anti-feminism, replacement theory, and eventually full-blown white nationalism. Radicalization isn't always sudden, it's gradual, often framed as just jokes. First comes normalization, racist or anti-Semitic memes hidden under irony, so there is a plausible deniability. This could come from popular public influencers such as, unfortunately, Charlie Kirk, who made many comments on his podcast and in debates that were racist, inflammatory, bigoted, close-minded, and cruel. And since we seemingly have a cancel culture campaign against anyone who doesn't shut up or praise Charlie Kirk, I want to make it clear that his death was a tragedy for the entire country and that political violence always divides us. I do not wish death on him. I wished for a change of heart and a deplatforming of his ideologies. I do not celebrate his death, but I also do not mourn him. And I will not pretend that just because he is deceased, he did not use his time on earth to cause more harm and division. That's just how I feel, and I am unapologetic about it. When you normalize cruel commentary, you lead into the acclamation stage, which is a constant exposure that makes hateful ideas feel ordinary. Watching long-winded right-wing podcasts and curating your own algorithmic bubble to feed you the rhetoric over and over and over again until it is normalized. Once normalized comes the dehumanization process. Minorities and opponents are treated as less than human, making violence thinkable and appropriate. The alt-right itself calls this red pilling, a Matrix reference for waking people up. though in reality it's a slow process of conditioning. The psychological hooks are loneliness, alienation, and the search for belonging. Angry young men, including incels, are especially vulnerable. They are no longer exposed to views and opinions of the other side. They only know what the right wing tells them about the other side, which is almost always a lie. Video games, meme boards, and YouTube commentary channels often serve as entry points. The so-called intellectual dark web, people like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, overlaps with what they call alt-light figures who might not be full-blown alt-right but share a lot of the same ideologies and rhetoric. And from there, the leap into full alt-right or even neo-Nazi content can happen quickly. This is a slow acclimation to cruel, hateful, and unscientific ideologies that are first masked as innocent poking fun at marginalized subcultures and the left as a whole. But as people are acclimated to the language, the shock value wears off and they start to adopt the ideologies more seriously. This ecosystem does not exist in a vacuum. Around the world, internet manipulation has been weaponized in politics. Russia, China, Israel, and other governments have used troll farms, bots, and meme campaigns to sway elections, flood social media, and destabilize trust. I made a video about this a while ago, about how we are all being manipulated by foreign and domestic governments in every space of our online activities. The alt-right burrows directly from these tactics, using bots, sock puppets, and troll raids to amplify their content and harass opponents. Put simply, the alt-right is less a traditional political party and more an online machine of radicalization. It began as trolling, it flourished through gaming and meme culture, and it weaponized algorithms to turn alienated young men into extremists. Even after its collapse as a public brand, the pipeline it created is still one of the most dangerous forces shaping American youth. And it looks a lot like what's been happening in other authoritarian contexts around the globe. And it's difficult to pin down, it's difficult to explain, and that's by design. They don't want you to be able to pin the escalation of violence and terror on them. They want irony and plausible deniability to hide behind so they can recruit more unsuspecting, lonely people into extreme right-wing thought. What these people who are sucked into these online ecosystems need is love, understanding, compassion, empathy, all things the right wing seems to demonize. The people who get sucked into this stuff are often lonely, traumatized, and full of pain and rage. And instead of getting the mental help and the care that they need, they find a sense of belonging with these groups that tells them it's okay to hate. It's okay to make fun of women and minorities. It's okay to dream up violence because the other side deserves what's coming to them. Someone recently told me, so what? It's just talk. Talk can't hurt anybody. And that mindset is dangerous. It normalizes harmful rhetoric. For years, the right has demonized the left for so-called quote-unquote cancel culture. But most examples of cancel culture were simply civilians responding to people in power causing real harm. Harvey Weinstein, for example, faced consequences only after widespread accusations of sexual assault, which helped fuel the Me Too movement. Of course, there were bad faith actors and cases where minor behavior was met with disproportionate outrage, which gave the right and many centrists an excuse to scoff at the very idea of public accountability. Ironically, the right now embraces its own cancel culture. After Charlie Kirk's killing, before any facts about the shooter's motives were known, right-wing influencers, GOP members of Congress, and Trump himself immediately fanned the flames of division, even hinting at war with the left. Kirk, a wealthy podcaster and Trump campaigner with no military or public service record, was flown home on Air Force Two with our tax dollars and honored with flags at half-staff by Trump. Contrast that with June 14th, 2025, when Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman, her husband, and their dogs were murdered in their home. That same night, another lawmaker and his wife were also attacked by the same man. Governor Tim Walz ordered state flags at half-staff in their memory. Trump's response? A Truth Social post where he didn't even name Melissa Hortman. He did not attend the funerals. There was no federal order to lower the flags. And Melissa spent her life dedicated to public service. So when the right says it's just talk, remember that it isn't. Trump and Republicans are making their priorities clear through selective outrage that they feed to you. They're weaponizing grief and demanding blind loyalty. The shooter was a mentally unstable young man, radicalized online not into a specific ideology, but into a state of rage fueled by the left-right paradigm. He was raised in a gun-obsessed, Trump-loving Christian household. His violence wasn't proof of a left-wing plot. It was proof of how dangerous unchecked extremism and toxic rhetoric can be. And it likely started with memes and jokes. The Trump administration has used this exact same method to normalize cruelty and shift the Overton window so much that so many Americans are accepting the rhetoric and cruelty. I can't tell you how many times people brushed Trump's comments as just a joke, only for him to do the thing that he joked about doing. And by that time, it was normal. The official White House social media accounts have been posting deranged memes and jokes over their cruelty to immigrants, to Palestinians in Gaza, and about Trump's unconstitutional military invasion of American cities. The jokes aren't just jokes. They are psychological tools meant to normalize cruelty so that fringe ideas and fascist rhetoric becomes normalized to the general public. What's happening online is now happening right in front of our eyes in our own taxpayer-funded government. And if we don't speak out, if we don't resist it, we will watch as our country spirals into something darker, cruel, and dangerous for anyone who doesn't subscribe to right-wing politics, and those politics will get more and more extreme. Even Marco Rubio is now suggesting that he will start revoking passports from U.S. citizens for their free speech if the Trump administration just doesn't like it or deems it to be terroristic, which they are already talking about labeling being a Democrat as terrorism. This is a move that would violate the first and most important constitutional amendment in our democracy. If that happens, we will cross a freedom threshold that might be impossible to come back from. I hope that this video reaches not only those who agree with me, but also those who don't, and those in the middle. Those who feel overwhelmed by the information, who are trapped in their online bubbles and don't see the reality that we are facing as a nation, where the left wing is demonized for being honest and realistic, and the right wing is creating martyrs out of people that only created more division. Donald Trump, the GOP, they do not want us to unite. They do not want peace. They want war. They want the left to no longer exist. They want us to know that they honor those who fall in line and punish anyone who dissents. They are rapidly taking everything from us, and only those on their side and those who have become disillusioned with our political system don't see it. I am asking you to open your eyes and to see it, to do something, to speak up, to keep sharing love and empathy and compassion and kindness, but to be bold in your opposition to what is happening. To not further the divide, but to continue fighting for justice, equality, freedom, and peace. We all have to take responsibility for our words and actions. We have to be willing to acknowledge that we feed into this on both sides. That is not to say that both sides are equally dangerous, and I've very clearly outlined that here. Because when I say things like this, there are always people who assume that because I don't only call out the right wing, I am playing the both sides of the same game, which couldn't be further from the truth. But it does mean that we have to be more strategic. We have to be more understanding and more open. We have to use more critical thinking and media literacy. We have to be willing to have conversations, not arguments. We have to be willing to empathize for those who have been victimized and radicalized. That doesn't mean you have to be friends with Nazis, and I've been accused of suggesting that. That means you have to pick your battles. And you have to know when it's appropriate to just let things go. And you won't always know. We're human and we're imperfect. And that's advice for myself too, because I don't always get it right. When you're being attacked and when you're in survival mode, being reactionary feels right. And we all do it. That's not going to just stop. But having the awareness helps cut down on how often you react and helps you navigate forward, making smarter, more strategic choices in your political commentary and debate. Do not let this discourage you. Let it fire you up. Not for war or for fighting like the other side is suggesting, but for creative, peaceful, and impactful ways that close the divide. Let it encourage you to have more productive conversations, to have a deeper understanding of human behavior, to get out of your algorithm and into the real world where you see that the online world rarely shows its ugly face, to recognize the trap and to avoid it. In the darkest times, we are the light. We have the power to overcome, but but we cannot do it until we are closing the divide and coming together in love, empathy, compassion, peace, and understanding of one another. If you're feeling confused about which side of the political aisle is fanning the flames of political violence, stop looking at retweets of random private citizens who have no major social influence. Stop letting bots and trolls convince you which side to be on. Instead, the most effective way to decide which side is more dangerous and out for war is to listen to what the most influential and powerful leaders are saying, those with the largest followings and support, those who are in power, have held power, or are hoping to hold power. What are they saying? How do they benefit from it? How will those who support them and follow them respond to their rhetoric? And to parents, stay aware of what your kids are doing online, the conversations that they're having, the people that they're meeting, the platforms that they are spending their time on, the jokes that they are making, the rhetoric that they're repeating. And to everyone else, I strongly encourage you to call out these cruel jokes when you hear them. The racism, the misogyny, the homophobia. When people around you are just making jokes, call it out. Don't normalize it. Don't allow the people around you to think that you're okay with it, because that is how the process starts, and it's how it comes from the internet cultures into the real world. The same thing happens where the jokes normalize the cruelty. People become acclimated and the shock value wears off, and then suddenly the ideology aligns with the original joke. That is an incredibly dangerous path to go down. It is a slippery slope. And we all need to be aware and calling it out and working toward a better future, and not finding humor in cruelty, not finding humor in things that harm others and beat down on those who are already marginalized and harmed by society. I'm an atheist. I'm an ex-Christian. I don't subscribe to belief in the Bible, but many people do. And many of the people that do subscribe to biblical beliefs and claim Christianity are the very ones that are upholding and supporting this rhetoric, this regime, the things Charlie Kirk was saying and doing. And I believe that every person, Christians and non-Christians alike, should be appalled and offended by this rhetoric, by this system, by this pipeline, and by the fact that the current regime is using it as a weapon against the American people to gain and hold political power and turn our country into something that none of us want except for them and those who profit and benefit from such a system.
We're a great country. We have radical left lunatics out there, and we just have to beat the hell out of them. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
Let's have trial by combat.
This week alone, he tried to rewrite the history of January 6th, refusing to acknowledge violence nearly stopped the transfer of power.
You had a peaceful, very peaceful, I left.
Here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. If I get elected, now if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least.
Donald Trump Jr. mocked the attack on Pelosi's husband by posting an image of a hammer and a pair of underpants with the message, "Got my Paul Pelosi Halloween costume ready."
Minnesota senators are reacting to Senator Mike Lee's decision to delete those posts.
Together we will take on the ultra-left-wing liars, losers, creeps, perverts, and freaks who are devouring the future of this state like a swarm of locusts. And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know?
And why is he still in jail? Why has he not been bailed out? By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out.
If she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks.
Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But
I'd actually like to go back to the old times of Tudor England. I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the two corners of the White House as a warning.
These deep state people, you know, we're going to start slitting throats on day one.
Or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
You have no idea what you just have unleashed across this entire country and this world. You have no idea. You have no idea the fire that you have ignited within this wife. The cries of this widow will echo around the world like a battle cry.